A nightmarish one-off or an unwelcome sign of a wider problem. Mercedes' strong form since a key upgrade that's meant to be a signpost for 2024 ended abruptly in an ABJECT Brazilian Grand Prix. Being best of the rest behind Red Bull on the road in the United States and Mexico after introducing a new floor left Mercedes feeling like it was making real progress. Then came a clear step back in Brazil, easily Mercedes' worst performance of the season, with what George Russell called a mind-boggling weekend to understand. Lewis Hamilton's only silver lining is that there are just a couple more races left for this car, then it's gone, so I'll be happy. Hamilton says they are just counting down the days this year, which marked a significant change in the mood and sentiment from the previous two Grand Prix. So how did it go so wrong so quickly? The warning signs for a mediocre Grand Prix at Interlagos were there in spades during the sprint race on Saturday. Mercedes suffered alarming drop-off from both cars and turned second and fourth at the end of lap 1 into fourth and seventh at the finish. Ordinarily, tyre management is a major strength of the W14, but not in Brazil. A weak rear end meant the car was not well balanced, the rear slid around a lot, and that seemed to kill the tyres. Russell was almost 26 seconds behind Verstappen, while Hamilton was overtaken easily by Yuki Tsunoda's AlphaTauri and was almost 35 seconds off the win. No surprise then that Hamilton called it a horrible race that wasn't enjoyable whatsoever. Unfortunately, Sunday's main event not only offered little respite, it got even worse. Mercedes' theory that this was all caused by a setup mistake proved to be correct. Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff admitted the car's ride height was slightly too high, a consequence of being conservative after getting disqualified for excessive plank wear in the last sprint weekend in Austin, but felt this was only part of the problem alongside something very fundamentally wrong mechanically. But Mercedes still didn't know what that was by the end of the weekend. So even though Parc Ferme rules limited the scope for setup changes before the Grand Prix, Mercedes admits it wouldn't have known where to start anyway. As a result, Sunday's race was a long, difficult one with almost no reward, as Hamilton and Russell gradually slipped back once again with no pace and bad tyre degradation. Hamilton finished 8th, more than a minute behind Verstappen, which was its worst deficit of 2023, but Mercedes didn't even deserve that. If Charles Leclerc hadn't had a problem on the formation lap and Daniel Ricciardo and Oscar Piastri weren't a lap down after being innocent victims of a first corner crash, Hamilton probably wouldn't have even been in the top 10. And to add insult to injury, Russell had to retire due to the risk of an imminent engine failure with rising oil temperatures. Wolff gave a scathing review of the performance afterwards, calling it inexcusable, totally baffling, and his worst experience in 13 years of F1. He also said he felt sorry Hamilton and Russell had to drive such a miserable thing. As well as being dog slow, bad on tyres and unreliable, Mercedes' vulnerability to others with the DRS was also badly exposed here. It's known to be a draggy car because of the bigger rear wing Mercedes tends to run to get the downforce needed when it doesn't have a powerful enough floor or efficient beam wing. Usually there is at least an advantage as it helps look after the tyres, but if that was the case in Brazil, then something else must have been seriously wrong. This was such a dramatic backward step that it's inevitably sparked a lot more concern about Mercedes than the last couple of races offered optimism about the future. It perhaps just shows a mix of the reality of how flawed this car is, how far Mercedes still has to go in terms of its understanding, and also how easy it is to get it wrong on a sprint weekend. Russell said there are so many question marks over what exactly went awry in Brazil, but as the car has been much stronger than this in recent races, even before the upgrade, it should be treated as a substantial one-off event, although right now it is one that Mercedes has no answers for. As for the progress Mercedes has or hasn't made recently, the team never pretended that the upgrade it brought to Austin was a silver bullet. The upgrade in question was to the floor, with the leading edge raised to further load the outboard fence on the tunnel inlets, which in turn should improve airflow quality to the rear of the car. The floor edge wing also features enhanced camber, increasing the local load there and helping accelerate the flow through the tunnels. While the team has done its best to solve limitations with its car this season, ultimately its aerodynamic problems have been layered onto a flawed mechanical platform. It needs the winter to make bigger changes across the board. That was always going to put a hard limit on what it could achieve in the final races of 2023, and maybe Brazil was just a harsh example of how weak an improved W14 can still be. The benefit of having a few races with the upgrade is that they help put Mercedes' progress into perspective. It was closer to Red Bull in Austin when Verstappen was out of position on the grid and had some brake issues in the race, a distant second in Mexico, and then thoroughly outperformed by several teams in Brazil. Mercedes still believes that its car has improved, even though there seems to be the same vulnerability to a nasty balance where the rear isn't strong enough to keep up with the front. There was also a wider purpose that's potentially still valid. This upgrade was primarily about Mercedes proving it had furthered its understanding of how to improve its car. If it worked and Mercedes knew why, it would know it's on the right track. There are signs that is the case, with a couple of races where the car was in a better place and evidence that the floor is producing more rear load as intended. What happened in Brazil may cast at least some doubt on that, as Hamilton reckons the floor just wasn't working properly, although exactly why that would be, neither he nor Mercedes would say. So that was maybe just an observation about a general existing weakness. And if a setup misstep really was to blame, and the races in Austin and Mexico were genuinely decent, then there is a chance this could just be a big outlier, especially as getting the car in the wrong window is very easy to do on a sprint weekend. Remember, that's how Red Bull opened the door for Mercedes to win in Brazil last year. Whatever positivity remains about the direction Mercedes is going in, the end of 2022 and the winter that followed is a cautionary tale. That late season performance step prompted a confidence and development direction that proved to be mistaken. And Hamilton even warned in Mexico this year that all Mercedes was doing was mirroring 12 months ago, improving, finishing a better second to Red Bull, but still in need of far bigger changes. The goal this time around was to ensure that any positivity was rooted more in better processes and understanding than just pure lap time. That's what plays a key part in the choices Mercedes makes for the future when bigger changes are possible with an all-new car and the team is freed from the geometric limitations that have constrained its in-season upgrades. The drivers have backed the team to not make the same mistakes going into the third year of this rule cycle. Russell has addressed that in some detail, putting it down to a different way of working. He reckons that Mercedes' poor 2022, the extent of the issues on the W13, and the urgency to recover for 2023 caused some rushed decisions and juggling too much. That led to what Russell calls more quantity over quality testing. Now he describes the work on the 2024 car as having a more thorough assessment of every single choice, as well as having a more nailed down direction. That guarantees nothing in terms of what performance the W15 will have, but Russell is adamant that Mercedes is at least not going to stumble at the first hurdle. Wolff feels that what happened at Interlagos was evidence that the development this year has just been a case of putting plasters on something that's not right. So in a roundabout way, he argued it justifies what Mercedes is working on for 2024, because this has proven that big changes are required. Whereas last year, winning in Brazil helped trick Mercedes into thinking certain parts of its concept were right after all. Another key difference compared to this time 12 months ago is that one extremely influential figure is no longer with Mercedes at all. Technical Director turned Chief Technical Officer Mike Elliott left the team recently, which completes a phased out reduction of his involvement since he instigated a job swap with James Allison earlier this year that put Elliott in the Chief Technical Officer role and brought Allison back to the front line as Technical Director again. This will inevitably divide opinion. Those who blame Elliott for the disappointment of the last 18 months will see it as a fresh start fully free of his influence, while others will see his departure as a loss given the sincere praise lavished on him by the likes of Wolff and Hamilton. Although the right leadership is key, and few will argue Mercedes is not in safe hands with Allison at the helm again, F1 teams are too vast and complicated for one person to be the difference between success and failure, just like there is never a single silver bullet technically. There are a lot of moving parts, and to force one final analogy, Mercedes is still working out the puzzle as far as these technical rules go. And for all its recent progress, based on what happened in Brazil, Mercedes is still missing quite a few pieces.